Hi, welcome to 938 Online. My name is Marc Lucenius, and I'm the lead pastor. And I've got some good news for us today. If you are brand new around here, you get to jump right in on this. But if you've been around, you've known that we've been looking to rebuild our next generation ministry with some new staffing. We had a tremendous guy, Kevin Giannotti, who led our children's ministry and our youth ministry, and he moved on home to be near family. And so over the last several months through the pandemic, we've been praying and asking God how he wants to fill that. And we're hoping to fill his role with two people now, because we have an emerging student ministry. And that's where the good news comes from for us, because we have found ourselves and hired for ourselves a student ministries director and a gentleman named Graham Bowen. Many of you know Graham and Jenna. They've been with our church for a couple years now, and they quickly got involved and really began embodying the vision. You've seen him. He's hosted for us. He's brought friends. We met him when we hosted a spike ball tournament together on Westchester University's campus, and he's got some pretty good game. He doesn't win all the time though, so you should test him out. But he's going to get going really soon, and we're really excited to have him on our team and have he and Jenna more part of the life of our body. You'll get to meet him next week in person if you're going to be there with us on Mother's Day, and you'll be hearing more from him soon. All right, getting into the message, I want to give you a word. A word that I think might help explain how you are feeling, and maybe if it doesn't explain how you're feeling, it's going to help you understand where other people are. I read an article this past week by Adam Grant in the New York Times, and he put this word out there, and you've heard this word before, but I think it's going to be a helpful word for us. The word is languishing. After 14 months of a pandemic, we're not burnt out because we still have some energy. We're not depressed because, and for a lot of people at least, because we still have some hope. But no one would also say that we are flourishing. A lot of people in our community, our neighbors, our friends, maybe those kids sitting next to you at school, they're languishing. Let me see if I can help you understand. This is how he says it. Languishing is the neglected middle child of mental health. I love that. The neglected middle child of mental health. It's the void between depression and flourishing, the absence of well-being. You don't have symptoms of mental illness, but you're not the picture of mental health either. You're not functioning at full capacity. What happens with languishing, it dulls your motivation, it disrupts your ability to focus, and triples the odds that you'll cut back on work. And part of the danger is that when you're languishing, you might not notice the dulling of delight or the dwindling of drive. You don't catch yourself slipping slowly into solitude. You're indifferent to your indifference. We've been talking last several weeks about boredom and just this like a sleeping dragon on its gold. There's this boredom, this languishing that has set in on our world. And he continues on. He says, when you can't see your suffering, you don't seek help or even do much to help yourself. And so I'm hoping that this word might awaken something in you. Maybe help you think about back to when you might have had a little bit more drive, or maybe a little bit more passion, or a lot more connection to other people. And as we come back, understanding this and breaking out of this rightly is going to help. And what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about how God and how the purpose God gives us and the pathway to that purpose can break us out of languishing. Okay? Now, when we start talking about purpose, this becomes a particularly important question to next generations, right? Particularly folks in their 20s. And speaking of Graham and folks in their 20s, one of the things we are committed to as a church is to investing ourselves well in the generation coming up and the generation coming in. So we want to think about these things carefully. But 86%, and this was a study done in 2016, 86% of young adults would say that you know you're an adult when you're making decisions in line with your purpose. That adulthood in some ways is the connection from your decisions to your purpose. The difficulty, at least as of 2016, only 43% of 18 to 24-year-olds had a sense of what their purpose was. And so they're almost forced into this middle ground. The author of the study said, this study isn't good news because coasting, as she describes it, or languishing, is existing. It's not thriving or flourishing. The majority of young adults who say they don't have a clear picture of what they want in life also say that they are existing but not thriving, while those with purpose more often say they are thriving. And I think that this is particularly relevant to almost all adults right now, not just young adults, because with the pandemic, everybody got the pause button stuck on just about all the things we were purposeful about before, which after being in pause for like 14 months and languishing, sometimes it's hard to get the engine running for that thing again. And sometimes our purpose might have changed. So today we're going to talk about our purpose, what our purpose can give us, and the process for understanding God's purpose. And we're going to get particularly nuanced when we talk about the process when it comes to God's purpose. Well, we are in a series and we're wrapping up today called All In. We're talking about what it means to be part of the body of Christ, that you are invaluable. If you are a Christian, that means you are a part of the body of Christ. You are an integral, invaluable part of God's body. In fact, you have gifts that if they don't get employed, we are not going to be able to become the fullness of what God would have for us. Also, you are inseparable. There's no such thing as this kind of Christian out on their own. If you're a Christian, you're part of God's family. And you can never be separated from the body of Christ. You might try, but it'll always be in irregularity. All right, and then last week we talked about how the body of Christ is indivisible, that by the Spirit we have been united together. And we practically talked about the central importance of how the generations need to be deliberate in connecting with each other and not act as if with the agenda of the world that separates people into market segments. All right. So today we're talking about what it means to be invested, and we're doing a case study in the Church of Corinth, and this was an invested group of people. They were wealthy, they were educated, they were gifted, they were fabulous, and when they came to the faith, their church was wealthy, educated, gifted, and fabulous, and a total mess. And this is going to be the messiest of all of the messages. This message in some ways is like the reality television show. I mean, talk like Big Brother, Jersey Shore, and the Real Housewives of the ancient Near East. It's going to be messy. They're going to be fighting over money. There is so much going on in this passage that we're going to be looking at today. We can't look at everything in Corinth, but we're going to look at one of the messiest, most drama, jacked up passages. And we're not going to be able to get to all of it. But as we look at it, what we're going to see that Paul, the apostle who wrote it, is a man with purpose. And we're going to see a community of people that's grappling to try to come and understand theirs and how he is guiding them forward and understanding what it means to find our purpose in God. All right, so let me go ahead and read the passage. And we're reading 1 Corinthians chapter 9. I can't cover all of it, so I'm going to skip some portions of it. But I want you to listen to this. If you listen well, you're going to hear drama, you're going to hear conflict, and it's going to be a whole big old mess. But we'll clean it up as we go through this message together. Starts out with Paul being actually quite defensive. This is kind of fun. He says, "Am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? Are you not the result of my work in the Lord? Even though I may not be an apostle to others, surely I am to you, for you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. This is my defense to those who sit in judgment on me. Don't we have the right to food and drink? Don't we have the right to take a believing wife along with us as the other apostles and the Lord's brothers and Cephas?" He's talking about Peter there. "Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat its grapes? Who tends a flock and does not drink the milk? If we have sown spiritual seed among you, is it too much if we reap a material harvest from you? If others have this right of support from you, shouldn't we have it all the more? But we do not use this right. On the contrary, we put up with anything rather than hinder the gospel of Christ. Don't you know that those who serve in the temple get their food from the temple, and that those who serve at the altar share in what is offered on the altar? In the same way, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel. And I have not used any of these rights, and I am not writing this in the hope that you will do such things for me. For I would rather die than allow anyone to deprive me of this boast. What then is my reward? Just this, that in preaching the gospel I may offer it free of charge, and so not make full use of my rights as a preacher of the gospel. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I might share in its blessings. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached the gospel to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize." All right, so we got everything in there. We have everything in there. What we have, though, particularly, we're going to work from the end of this passage back to the beginning. We have a man who is focused. We have a man who has a clear sense of purpose. And I think I'm going to be able to help us with a process to get there. So let's talk about the two things that Paul's purpose gives them. First of all, Paul's purpose gives them the ability to pivot. It gives them the ability to pivot. Pivot was like one of those big words in 2020. Pivoting, if you think of in a basketball world, right? If I'm a basketball player and I have the ball, I make it my goal. I am going to go and score. I'm going to drive the ball, and I come down the lane. And then when somebody covers me, they block my intention of getting to the goal. But the thing is my goal wasn't to do a layup. My goal was to score. And so what happens when somebody pivots in basketball, they have to pick up their dribble because they can't continue going. They're defended, right? But they can still pivot on one foot, right? They can move around. And once they start moving around, they start finding other options. Maybe somebody to pass to. Maybe an opportunity to slip past the defender to get into the basket. Once they start pivoting, they have other options. They can still go to their goal. Listen to how Paul talks about it. He says, look, I have been called to preach the gospel. Sometimes it's to the Jews, sometimes it's to the Gentiles. And to the Jews, I pivot and become a Jew. And when I'm with the Gentiles, I don't act like a Jew. I mean, I grew up with Jews. I grew up with a Jewish heritage, but I don't have to live under their laws. I become like someone not under that law. He pivots based upon the opportunity in front of him. One of the things that's going on behind the scenes in this is that Paul, as a missionary, has been going from town to town to town. Sometimes he has funds to do it, sometimes he doesn't. And so one of the things that's known about Paul is that he made tents. He was a gig worker. He had a side hustle where he'd make tents. And so it wouldn't be an uncommon thing for Paul to go over to the synagogue and teach a message and to meet with some folks afterwards, hit the market on the way back, pick up some canvas or whatever they made tents from back then, and go back to wherever he stayed and start sewing them up, sell them, be able to eat off that, pay the rent for the next place where he's going to teach. And that's how he covered. He pivoted based upon the opportunities in front of him. When you have a purpose that's bigger than your method, you can change around it. During the pandemic, you might have read a story about Quarter World. Quarter World is an arcade in Oregon. And when the lockdown happened, obviously nobody was going to an arcade. I mean, that's pretty much one of the last places anybody wanted to go during the pandemic. But it didn't mean that people didn't need gaming as a fun opportunity, right? And so they still had a mission. What did they do? They pivoted. What they started doing is, rather than try to get people into their store to use the games there, they started renting out their pinball machines and arcade games to people in their homes for $150 a month. Or something like that. And so they began delivering the pinball machines. They began delivering the arcade games. And so people, who needed something to do with their time could have that pinball machine in their basement or whatever. And in pivoting, they're able to keep themselves afloat. They're able to keep their employees employed. And people did this all the way around the economy. And it was fun to see the creative ways that people were able to pivot. When you have a purpose that's bigger than your method, you're able to pivot. As a church, when the lockdown happened for us, we still were committed to doing youth ministry. Our preschool family started, we continued to connect to our kids. We met on Zoom, and when the kids got tired of doing Zoom, we found other ways to connect with kids. And when we lost our youth director, we started thinking we had a gap, but then we realized that there was an opportunity. We still needed to invest in the next generation, but we realized that the people who were probably best equipped and have always been best equipped to disciple their kids are parents. And so we found some resources called D6. And so for the last several months, we've been distributing devotional magazines for parents to do with their kids. The parents, if you're a parent, you know about this, but some folks aren't. But each family would get a devotional magazine for each parent, and a age-appropriate devotional magazine for each kid. So each kid could be in the Word every single day and in the same part of Scriptures that the parents are, which opens up dialogue. And not every family's talking about this every day, but what's more important is that we are connecting to God. We are pivoting to continue to invest in the next generation. And I think it's probably helped us as parents, it certainly helped me as a parent, have different kinds of conversations and take more responsibility in the spiritual development of our kids. The purpose didn't change to invest in the next generation. We just had to pivot, all right? When it comes to languishing, a lot of times, for a lot of us, we had these methods that we were running. And we were running these, whatever it was, might have been our workplace or maybe some of our personal interest, hobbies, or things we were passionate about. Once we lost the method, we lost our purpose around it. It might be now time to go back to, what do I miss about that, and what was the purpose for it? All right. Second thing that purpose gives you is it gives you a passion. And because when you know your purpose, you will suffer for it. The word passion literally comes from from the Latin word pascha, which is to suffer. And it all points back to Jesus and his passion. When they talk about Passion Week, they talk about the week of Jesus' suffering. And we know what's important to us because we will suffer for it. I was out on a run today, and I came across a grandmother who was just trying to get her granddaughter to stop crying. And this grandmother will spend a few hours with that granddaughter because she loves that granddaughter. She wants to do whatever she takes for that granddaughter. But I bet you anything, once that mom comes, that grandmother's like, all right, I'm done. She's yours. I'm out of here, right? Because she, the mother of that baby, I know, will do whatever it takes to take care of this baby for the next 21 hours until maybe somebody else comes to take care of her next. But that mother will do whatever it takes. Why? Because that's her daughter, and she's in it. The grandmother is mostly in it, but it's not her daughter. She loves her daughter, who's the mom, and she loves her granddaughter. But our willingness to suffer is the measure of that which we are passionate for. Hebrews 12 describes this really clearly about Jesus. It says, Jesus endured the cross, scorning its shame for the joy set before him. So Jesus took nails to his hands, to his feet. He went through the long, painful process of asphyxiation. He was tortured beforehand, not because he felt like it. I mean, the suffering began by leaving the perfections of heaven and coming into this broken world and dealing with this broken world, having to grow up, go through puberty, to not know his purpose, to not know why he's here, having to come to understand that into time and to go through that, and then come to understand that not only was the Messiah who was going to have to suffer and to suffer for the sins of the world and to be crushed under the wrath of God for the sins of this world. He did this for joy. He did this because you are the joy set before him. His willingness to suffer was for the joy of helping you find your way back to the Father. Whatever it takes. And the Father himself would give his very own beloved Son. Why? For the joy of bringing people back together for him, for love. His joy was for you to find the fullness of your satisfaction in him. That was the joy set before him. This is why Paul says in the passage, he says, I strike a blow to my body. I beat my body. I make my body my slave. Why? Because I want to last in this thing as long as possible. I want to give everything I have. I do not want to run out of gas. I want to be at my best. Why? I will suffer for this because I am called to this. This is my purpose. I will do whatever it takes to fulfill this. He says, woe to me if I do not fulfill my purpose of preaching the gospel. He says, I beat my body. And it taps into one of the most common storylines of this world, right? Think Rocky, right? If you haven't seen it in a while, maybe you haven't seen it ever, I'm going to give this snapshot of it. You know, Rocky begins, he's a washed-up boxer. And he's a washed-up boxer, and he's basically, you know, a muscle guy for a loan shark. And he doesn't even respect himself. And then comes an opportunity, the opportunity of a lifetime to fight the heavyweight champion of the world. And what happens? Rocky's given a purpose. Once he gets his purpose, he's willing to do whatever it takes. He's willing to put on really dirty, ugly sweatpants and clothes, get up first thing in the morning and start running. He'll eat raw eggs. emerging movies, but then he'll chase little chickens around. He'll go to Siberia and lift big wood and run up hills, run through snow. He will do whatever it takes. He'll go through the challenges, and they'll play Survivor music in the background, and he will go through all the challenges, right, to strengthen himself for the opportunity. Why? Because he's got a clear purpose. The beautiful thing of particularly the first Rocky movie, though, is Rocky didn't win. His purpose wasn't to win. You felt triumphant at the end, not because of his victory, but because of his purpose. And he told Adrian his purpose. He says, look, I just want to know I can go 12 rounds with the champ. Then I'll know I'm not a bum. And the story was complete. And the bum that he was at the front, he knew that he wasn't. Why? Because he found his purpose. And when he stepped into it and did whatever it took to suffer for it, he was rewarded in the end. Same with Jesus. He didn't come to win. He came to lose so that he could win you. Winning people is why Paul beat his body. Winning people is why the church was put here. The heart of our goal as a church is to help people find their way back to God. When it comes to our purpose, we build community, strengthen faith, extend compassion. Community, faith, compassion. We will suffer for these values. We will suffer for what we believe about these values. In fact, people have left our church because we would not violate these values for their preferences. We will suffer for these values. You know what you value by what you'll suffer for. And Jesus said this way when it comes to discipleship. He says, look, unless you're ready to deny yourself and take up your cross daily, you cannot be my disciple. And this is where it started getting messy in Corinth. Because you had Paul with this unbelievable purpose and this unbelievable focus, and then you had this just sort of this messy church that's trying to figure out. And what happens is Paul comes and he starts talking to them about money. He starts talking to them about money. Remember, they're wealthy and affluent, and when you start talking to wealthy people about their money, they get a little bit funny about it. But here's the principle, though. Whenever you start dealing with issues of purpose, it always involves your money. Because until you can trust God with your provision, you're likely to not trust him with your purpose. Money runs through so many things in our lives. And that's what starts happening with Paul and the Corinthians. Let me see if I can explain what starts happening here. Is that in this passage, you have Paul and the other teachers of the church are explaining to the Corinthians that the basic principle, what it means to be part of the body of Christ, part of the people of God, and what they've done for all through history is that the people of God set aside 10% of their income, 10% of their harvest, and they give it to the spiritual community. They give it to the temple, they give it to the synagogue, they give it to the church. And the people are like, what? Yeah, you might be saying, what? And before you can't turn me off here, hang in there. Let me see if I can explain this. They had two basic reasons, and this goes all the way back to the time of Moses, all the way back to Abraham. See, this is how it worked. God gives, to help people understand what it means to follow God, God owns all things. He owns everything. He owns this world. He made this world. He made you, made this world. And the idea is that he wants us to set aside the first 10% of our wealth and our income so that we'll learn to trust him with our wealth. So we'll learn to trust him with stuff. He says, look, you can keep 90% for yourself. But start by living a life of generosity by giving away the first 10%. And this does two things. It helps us understand who has given us all things. It helps us to learn to trust God with our provision. but it also helps to fuel God's mission in the world, to fuel the temple, fuel the synagogue, it's fueled the church. And churches like Project 938 and most of the churches that you see flourishing are flourishing because of people who trust God. They give 10%, and that becomes the fuel to enable churches to continue to grow and to invest in their communities and to serve well. And that's true about Project 938. That's true of a lot of other churches. Now, this might be blowing your mind. This might be freaking you out, okay? So before you freak out, like the Corinthians were kind of freaking out about this. In fact, Paul got even quirkier with this. He says, look, here's the thing. You need to be given this way, but I don't want any of your money. He's like, I don't want any of your money. I want to give it free of charge because I don't want to put any obstacle, right? His purpose was to extend the gospel. He didn't want it to get distracted with that. But he also wanted to say, look, but you still need to do this. This is still the way we do this. Now, I think for a lot of people, this is a little bit strange, and I think I'm going to have something that's going to help you understand this. Because understanding our purpose in God is not something that happens quickly. It happens over the course of a process. And this is the third part of this message, that there's a process when it comes to our purpose. And it always includes the people of God. I'm going to kill you with P words, by the way, where I'm just going to start crushing you with P words: provision, purpose, process. All right, you ready? All right, so there's a process to understanding your purpose of God. What I'm not saying is that you can't find purpose outside of God. There's a lot of people that find an awful lot of purpose in this world, and they serve their purpose, and it's really good. But if you want to understand what God's purpose is for your life, it's going to take a little while. If you want to really tap yourself into what God has called you to, it happens at the speed of love. It's not going to happen right away. I think for most people, particularly, and I'm going to speak particularly adults, they go through about 5 stages when it comes to understanding their purpose, understanding what it means to be a part of the people of God, and finding your purpose connected to it. The first stage looks like this: that when you start experiencing Christian community or the people of God or church, you experience it as a product. That was the case for me. I remember being brought to a Christian group, and in my mind, it was like, is this worth my time? Is this worth my energy? Are these people worth me hanging around? Do I want to hang around these people? This is a natural thing, and it's an okay thing. And but eventually, as you experience like church and a faith community as a product, you begin to get to stage 2. Stage 2, and it usually doesn't take very long, is you experience church as a profit. Not as like a financial profit, but like as in a PROFHET profit. See, the prophet communicates what's true of who God is to this world. And quite oftentimes the prophet offends. And what will happen to just about anybody who's looking into the truth of God is that they will come to terms with recognizing that the gospel will eventually disagree with you. The gospel will eventually disagree with your culture. The gospel will come and challenge you. The gospel will come and challenge your culture. It'll challenge your assumptions. It'll challenge your behaviors. It'll challenge what you think. It'll challenge what you want. It may even challenge what you think your purpose is. And typically speaking, a lot of times when people go from seeing the value of church and its product that they're experiencing, and they start experiencing the profit, they'll typically go to another church, see if they can find something better. But eventually, if you can get past the profit stage and recognize that the gospel is going to offend and it is going to challenge you, and if you will step into that challenge, there's a transformation that happens. You enter into the family of God, and now the church becomes your parent. As a parent, you begin, when you have the church as your parent or the people of God in whatever form it takes, what ends up happening is you start growing really fast. I mean, think about what kids are like when they're young. You see them every 3 months, like they're bigger. They keep growing. They're growing really fast. Your faith metabolism is really high and you're just constantly learning. You're constantly growing. Every sermon seems to teach you something you never even thought of before. Every song is like, that concept blows my mind. And you grow really, really fast when you're in that parent stage. It's in the parent stage where you find a lot of people who are able to help you in a lot of different ways. But the parent stage is never supposed to last forever, right? Kids aren't supposed to stay in their home forever. Eventually they need to move out of the basement. And that's when people move into the partner stage. And when it comes to your purpose, it's tough for kids to understand their purpose in the parent stage, but they start testing things out. They start trying things out. When it comes to your finances, you start trusting God more and more with your money. When you start to trust Him with your provision, you start seeing more opportunities for your purpose. When you get to the partner stage, you've gotten to the place where you start seeing things in light of eternity. You start seeing things as an adult. You're sort of a peer of the church. You don't necessarily need the church to grow, but you need the church for your purpose. You recognize that if you're going to fulfill your purpose and what God's put you on this planet, you're going to need the people of God around you. Whether it's enabling you to be the best you could be in insurance, or as a doctor or a nurse or a teacher, you need the church. You need the people of God so that you can bring your best into your purpose and your mission. You recognize that. You begin seeing your life. You begin seeing things in the scope of, eternity. And the church is a tremendous partner. And when the church becomes a partner, you have no problem giving 10%. Why? Because you need it. You've learned to trust God with your provision. You know that He'll provide for you. That's not a big deal. That's not really the issue. You start thinking in terms of your life as it relates to eternity. We don't think about eternity very often. A lot of times we're looking at things that are measurable, right? Things that are measurable in this world, right? We're working from this line to this line. Between 5 and 6, there's 16 little different lines, and that's how almost every year is, right? There's ups and downs, different kinds of challenges, all of these things we can measure. But if our life is like a ruler, eternity is like the interstate highway system of the United States. Hundreds and thousands of countless miles that go on forever. When you've gotten to the partner stage, you're no longer living for these lines. You're living for what's going to matter in the big picture. The kind of person you're going to become in this short little trip from here to here. Who's the kind of person you're going to be when you get to that next phase? What are you investing in that's going to last into that next phase? The church becomes a partner. Now, for some folks, they make the church their profession. It becomes tied to their purpose. But for most folks, the goal is to understand the church as your partner and to understand your purpose in light of eternity. This is why the Father could give the most eternal gift He could by giving His Son for you. That's why Jesus is all in for the church. He put His entire life in the church. That's why He says, look, I will build my church. The church is my plan A. I do not have a plan B. I will go at the speed of love. I will go at the church. I will ride the churches and its ups and its downs, but make no mistake, there will be a day when Jesus will bring the entire church together from every tribe, tongue, nation, and language. And when they look at Him, they will be captivated by Him. Revelation talks about all the different tribes, tongues, language, praising God in their languages and being captivated by the Lamb, slain for the sins of the world at the center. It's for that joy, the joy of the great banquet, the great marriage supper feast that Jesus died for. If you don't know your purpose yet, give yourself some space. Give yourself some grace. Take a next step. If you're in the product stage, keep hanging around, keep checking it out. If you're in the prophet stage and you're kind of feeling offended and maybe I offended you today, that's all right. Keep asking questions. If you're in the parent stage, keep growing. Trust God. Take some risks. Do some stuff in faith. Trust Him with your provision. If you're in the partner stage, keep thinking about eternity. Keep thinking about how your work matters to God, the way you love people matters to God, what you do with your home and your friendships. Think about how they matter to God, and start thinking about the joy set before you. We're talking about this series all in because Jesus is all in for this world. This is how we come together. Next week, we are going to start a series that's going to take the micro approach. We've been talking about what it means for us to be all in, all of us together. Next week, we're going to talk about what does it mean for us to reconnect specifically. We're going to be looking through the New Testament at all the one another verses. And we've got something for you to do each day. We're going to have something to do for you on Sunday. And next week, we're starting that series, Mother's Day, in person. Hope you can join us for one another. Thanks for joining us. Let me pray. Jesus, give us your eyes for this world. Give us your eyes for ourselves. To those who are languishing, help us to see ourselves as your joy. Help us to recognize that you've been all in for us. For those who are languishing, help us take a next step, one simple step towards our purpose. Wherever that might be, help us to take some next step and to gain a little bit more momentum. And the next day, help us to gain a little bit more momentum and more clarity. And at the heart of it, would you help us to see your great love and your great joy in giving your life away? That we might be the same, that we be the kind of people that give our life away for your purposes. Amen.